Hello, I'm Rob Doherty and this is the FSTVS podcast, Executive Edition, supported by Liberary Consulting and hosted by Julian Scott, animation consultant for Film London. In this series we'll be chatting to the big hitters in the animation industry and discovering a little bit more about what they do, how they got there, their thoughts on the animation industry, and, I hope, get to meet the person behind that executive title. In today's episode, Julian is chatting with Helen Brunsdon. Helen has worked extensively across the animation industry as a consultant, producer and executive, working with some of the most creative and biggest names in animation, and lectured at some of the most prestigious universities and animation schools around the world. Short film funding, the British Animation Awards, AI, the joys and challenges of mentoring, and horses are some of the topics covered. And while the quality of the record isn't the best on this one, Helen's energy and warmth shines through, and it's well worth sticking with. Enjoy it.
Helen, welcome to the FSTVS podcast. How's it going?
Oh, thank you, Julian. Thank you for having me. No, I'm excited. I'm excited to be here, Julian.
Good. We want to know a little bit more about Helen Brunsdon, the person, as well as Helen Brunsdon, the animation executive. Before we get into your passion for animation and where your journey into the industry started, rumour has it we share a passion for horses?
Absolutely. And listen, I know that traditional question might be, what did I want to do growing up? And it was definitely work with horses in some capacity. I think I grew too tall to be a jockey and maybe too wide. Sort of like, but I was always artistic. You know, I had a traditional route up through school doing art. And then I did a foundation art course, which led me into an animation degree. So I feel I've had quite a traditional route up through art. But if you ask me, then it's always horses are always on the other side. And everybody that knows me, I love cowboy iconology and everything else.
No, I didn't know any of that at all. You said you had a fairly traditional entry into animation and did a degree, but you're clearly very passionate about it. You've dedicated your life to it. So what is it that drives you in terms of animation? Why do you think it's so special?
I mean, everybody says the people, don't they? But I actually, and it is part of the answer, but I still like the work that people produce. I still love, but I like art in general. You know, I like having art on my walls in my home. I like, culturing, sort of like educating my kids. I've got 2 teenage kids and I've got, I drag them around museums and art galleries. So I culture in general is very, very much part of my life. And animation per se, I would say growing up, I think like everybody else, I was watching, Rhubarb and Custers on telly. I was watching lots of different animations. I probably didn't consider how they were made. I just enjoyed them. And when I was on foundation, I do remember that a point being that the Aardman co-founders, Peter Dave, came in to give a talk in our foundation course, and they showed us the Chew It adverts back in the 80s.
Oh, right, yeah.
And I just remember going, wow. And that was the point. That was one of my turning points to say, wow, how on earth did they make those? I really want to know that. And I think from an age, it was about the movement in terms of animation per se, but I like the whole, I like the sound, the music, the editing, how it was put together. I just was really intrigued by all of the filmmaking aspects of it, and it was a TV commercial. I thought, wow, this is great, and you can get a job in it. Brilliant.
I think that's the interesting thing, isn't it? Animation is often seen as, and it rightly so, as an art form, but it's actually also a business, isn't it? It's a very serious business where quite a lot of money is at stake, and people in employment and things like that. It's not just art; it's commercial art, I guess.
Yeah, and one of my pet hates is that people don't take our sector seriously. They do think it's cartoons are meant to people laugh, in it, and to just go, actually, it's a really serious business. We hold our weight when it comes to the creative industries and the ecosystem of the UK economy at the moment. And I just feel that not enough profile. I think it is for me is that not enough gets into the public perception of our sectors. And I think animation is one of them. I think at the moment, the public perception of games has really come into its own. But I think because, you know me, I'm one for Venn diagrams. If you do a Venn diagram of where animation sits, we cross over into film, television, creative tech, music. We've got so much as an art form that we cover, whether it's explainer videos, it's corporate, it's advertising, it's films, it's television, it's short films, it's all of that, it's apps, it's games. Our talent our workforces cross over into many, many different sectors,
No, absolutely.
So, yeah.
I think when I did the Film London animation strategy a couple of years ago, and I was talking to the studios in London, and I'm sure it goes for other parts of the country as well, one of the sort of gripes was exactly that animation as a sort of an economic driver for the country is not like games, which is sort of specific, and people can say games delivers this to the economy. Animation is subsumed into television and film. It's, so the contribution that film makes the economy is this, but a chunk of that is animation, and the same goes for television. It's a bit frustrating that those, as you say, those figures aren't out there in the public domain, and people go, wow, actually it's not just cartoons for fun, it's actually a serious business.
It is, and listen, I think our trade organisations like Animation UK and PACT are doing sort of like great advocacy work in terms of that, in terms of the data collection and analysis and putting it in front of the right people in government. It's just that I think personally more can be outward facing towards the public. I definitely do. Sort of growing up, and maybe to this day, my parents still don't get what I do. In terms of they'll see it on telly. I mean, for years, my grandmother back in the day thought I did that. Remember that famous CGI milk bottle ad? Mm-hmm. And I think she thought I did that. And I was sort of. But at least she'd recognised it as animation. But yeah, I just feel that more can be profiled, really. And I know sometimes I'm going to be saying some really general, sweeping statements. But I just feel that when it comes to the music industry, I think it's immediate. People recognise a talented musician, and sometimes when you're growing up through a traditional route through school, they recognise sporting achievements, they recognise musical achievements, they don't always recognise art achievements. And if somebody is really, really creative, it's how, with the best will in the world, that a school or a university can really channel that for you. I was lucky, I had a really, really great A-level art teacher that really encouraged us and really got us thinking outside the box about sketching and about drawing in general, and that really sort of saw me right.
No, it's interesting you say that. I mean, it's I haven't looked at the figures for a while, but sort of pre-pandemic, certainly the creative industries were the fastest growing sector of the UK economy, and that's but still there is this perception, I think probably from parents as much as anything else, my father included, that a job in the creative industries wasn't like a proper job.
Yeah, exactly. And I know that stat because I just quoted it this morning. It's as of 2023, we the creative industries contributed 124 billion pounds to the UK economy. That's risen since the last figure in 2019. And we've got those stats to back us up and reports, and it's been widely reported. And yeah, and I think when when you see these trade missions and you see these, sort of like, the creative industries are represented at anything like the Olympics, or, I've just come back from a British Council trip to Saudi Arabia, and, just the sort of like, other countries want to know more about our creative industries and how have we grown them, and what, I think sometimes they're valued outside the UK a little bit more, maybe. I don't know, rightly or wrongly, whether that's across but on a global scale, I feel we hold our weight,
No, for sure. And there's so much work, as I've discussed with a few people like Kate O'Connor from Animation UK about the work that's going on with, and you were involved in the initial tax incentives and getting those through for animation and things like that when you were at Animation UK. Going back to something you were talking about earlier on about sort of skills and talent and things like that. This is something that comes up quite a lot in these podcasts, and I think there's something like 130 degree courses related to animation in the UK across about 50, 60 universities. And I know you've lectured at some of them, as well as colleges and schools around the world. Do you find there are differences between the way our universities sort of teach and develop animation talent versus, I don't know, someone like Gobelin in France or a Canadian college?
Yes, so there's so many ways to answer that, because I think it's unfair to compare our universities with somewhere like Gobelin, because it's Gobelin is a private postgrad school, so we can never compare it with our postgrad schools in lots of ways. And but I think what you can talk about a little bit, what we've always been sort of saying, is that they respect in territories like France, they respect going back into education, and I feel there's a lot of onus in us in the UK to quickly graduate from school, quickly get into university, quickly graduate and try to find a job at 22, 23. And you wouldn't consider that many people going back as mature students. And I think a lot of overseas countries, you might come out from a undergrad course early 20s and then work in the industry for a bit and then go back in and be educated at 28, 29. Not enough of us encourage that, maybe because we have to find a job very quickly. I try my hardest not to diss lecturers and professors in our universities, because I think they've got a tough job. I think universities are now a tough job. They run like businesses, and that signals to me that they're trying to make money. And I always feel the UK universities, for me, if I had my time over again, not that I wouldn't choose animation, but I might choose fine art. There's never been a better time to study fine art, to try and express yourself, find different processes. There's never, before it goes, because they take over quite a large footprint of a university, the arts courses. And I think sometimes the business side of things takes over, that they want to fill it with lecture theatres and get more students in. And that, for me, is things. Having said that, I think our whole educational system needs a refresh. To maybe, when I was growing up, we definitely had universities and polytechnics, and one was more vocational and one was more creative. And I feel that we need to get back to more of that, and we're starting to see that. I don't always believe that everybody should go to university. I feel it should be for whoever wants to. I feel if you want to get out and do animation at 16, there is opportunities there for you. Between 16 and 19 years, you don't have to, and 18 to 21 years, you don't have to go to university. So I know there's a lot of courses coming out of the UK, and I mentor quite a few. I think I'm always a negative angle to some universities, is I don't always feel that they are industry ready. I don't mean work ready. I mean sort of industry ready. They don't always know about professional practice, and it's not to say that this isn't taught. I don't know whether the students are listening. So I think when their tutors are telling them, they think, oh, that's really nice to know. But I think it doesn't quite hit them. until they've left, and I think, oh, what do I do now? Like putting their shorts into festivals, or knowing how to approach and network with the industry. So I think a lot of good gets done at university by the lecturers on a tight budget, trying to educate them. And I feel that the students need to take a little bit more responsibility. I think that they go straight from school now, where they're taught and they're spoon-fed, and now I think in universities they don't quite know how to act amongst themselves and how to initiate themselves and be proactive, and I believe it or not, I was like that, in terms of, we would all sort of like get together and produce films, and the hunger's still got to be there at universities for students, I feel, to want to do animation, because it's the only time you can be prolific. Get going, use all the facilities going in universities.
Sure, and it's, it's the jumping off point for an awful lot of very talented people at those courses. But it's interesting what you say about, the difference between being industry ready and work ready, because there's been quite a lot of talk about the, and I often say this, the perceived gap between what universities the kind of students that universities produce and what the studios expect on, 10 o'clock on a Monday morning when they start their job. And there seems to be a little bit of a gap sometimes between those two things, in that the studio expects someone to sort of walk in, sit down and just start work, which probably is a bit of an over expectation. But on the other side of it, maybe there's something more that the training organisations, be they universities, art schools, whatever they are, to give the students a little bit more of an understanding about what working in the industry actually requires.
Yeah, and I think, and listen, again, sort of a general statement is sort of, a lot of universities do group projects, a lot of universities do individual projects, and both has its values. What I noticed from overseas is that there isn't so much of an emphasis on a thesis, so like there is an emphasis on what have you learned and your findings of doing a group project, or a final project, is a final film, and all that energy is into that. I just feel sort of, it's hard, because I think more pride should get taken into the quality of the films produced, and there are some great films that come out of UK universities, but also just sort of, but equally you can be at university and put together a really good show reel. My definition of that is, you don't have to be a good editor. You have to find a good editor. It's not trying to be everywhere at once. It's trying to sort of say, actually, I can edit, but is that good enough if you want it to be your show reel? Why don't we try and get a professional editor in that could cut a few of your show reels together, across a course? So it's sort of learning that you don't have to do everything, and learning that your potential fellow peers are going to be your competitors. So either, we know companies that set up during their university years that going, and sort of, so it's just sort of like, do what you can to get the most out of the university courses,
No, it's interesting. You also talked about networking. Adrian Wotton, who's the chief exec of Film London, whenever he does a presentation to students or sort of new entrants into the industry, he always finishes up with saying, I'm going to give you 3 bits of advice that I think are the most critical bits of advice I could give anybody entering the creative industries. And that's networking, and networking. And it's so true. I mean, it's, there's job adverts out there, FSTVS does job adverts, there's job alerts which you can sign up for. But it is as much of that, it's as much, working with, as you say, your competitors to a certain extent, people that, you're working with, getting into communities, finding out what's going on. You can't, and that's possibly the bit that the training organisations don't always do, is explaining how you move on with, a job might last 6 months or 9 months, but then you've got to go and find the next one. And you might want to be talking to the producer and finding out what the producer's doing next. And could you go and work with them, or, etc.
Yeah, and I feel it's quite easy for us in animation because the content is there to be viewed and for you to sit through the credits to know who made it. You've got IMDb, you've got various resources now to look at who's making what, where, when. And it's sort of it's knowing at university that is what you've got to do. It is a passionate industry. It is an art form that exists in lots of different facets, and there isn't an excuse if you don't know who's doing what, where, when. And I think somebody it's out there all the time, but as somebody once said, an opportunity really presents itself. You've got to know when you're being faced with an opportunity and what to do with it. And one of those is you might meet somebody in passing and you think, oh, I don't know, oh my God, it was so and so, from the industry. Oh, and sort of, you can immediately struck up a conversation and sort of say, do you mind if I link in with you, or do you mind if we had a conversation? I think we're a very giving industry of our time. To go and have a coffee with somebody, or just to sort of like give. Some probably say, Julian, I give too much of my time for free, in terms of advice. But we're all there to try and get people to succeed. That's the bottom line. So.
Well, it's interesting because you just give me a very, very neat segue into the next thing I wanted to talk about, which is you've been a mentor for Think Bigger. And from what I understand, your mentee had hearing difficulties. And I think animation is one of the most diverse sectors of the screen industries. But do you think the industry is missing out on a sort of a rich seam of talent, of people who identify as having some form of disability and therefore not feeling they're in a position where they can access jobs, even down to, somebody who may be, neurodiverse, and a job advert's out there saying, must be a team player and a collaborator. And they think to themselves, well, actually, that's the last thing I am, so I won't bother applying for the job. But they could be supremely talented. Do you think there's more that we could be doing as an industry to attract people in and find ways to retain them?
I mean, the answer is yes, definitely. I think I would split that up into workforce and also about the work produced that we see on our screens and devices. So I feel that we've got, we're getting there, maybe not enough, sort of like diverse work on screen, sort of like, we can cite a few shows that pick up on certain traits and disabilities, which I think is great. I think more can be done. Don't get, so which I think the commissioners are on to, and those ideas are always coming about. I think when it comes to the workforce, I think it's spotting yourself in the application process, isn't it? Sort of like if somebody, and I think there's a way to go, but I think some guidelines are changing. So, you might not be good. Equally, you might not be good at grammar and spelling, and you might see that as something that I can never apply for something. But now lots of places let you speak to camera, actually do a little mini interview on camera, or you can present. You might have great presentation skills in terms of speaking to camera, and you might self-record yourself, and that's your application. I think it's challenging. Wherever you see a job advertised, to see if they would ever consider, if you don't see it in the guidelines, challenge it, to become that. And feel free to ask what the working conditions are like, or, do you have accessibility? We all know that film sets have progressively got better. Well, I don't believe they're 100% there about for the workforce, but I think don't be afraid to challenge guidelines, or if you see a job advertised that why doesn't it say certain things, or would they consider things. But yeah, absolutely, we can be doing more, and I think the unsung heroes that are doing more don't always come to light, maybe, you know. But yeah, my lovely animator and director sort of had hearing difficulties, and it was during the pandemic, so they had to pitch for film funding over Zoom, and so part of my sort of mentoring was them pitching to me and retuning, refining that pitch so it came over well over Zoom. And I learned a lot about transcription and subtitles, you know, what they were picking up in the Zoom sort of function, and whether, you know, people applying actually had that function and could, you know, so they could read the subtitles. So they might be, and I said pre-warn them, there might be a bit of a delay while you catch up reading it to think of your answer. So.
No, sure. We did some work at Film London with inclusivity about a year ago, and we did a load of workshops with studios based in London with people in charge of hiring, and it was very, very interesting because I think, to me, the way to try and solve the challenge is to not explain, because, you know, studio heads know, but help them realize and find and understand that they're actually missing out. There's a possibility they're missing out on some incredible talent. And what they need to do is to maybe just adjust those adverts. As you've just said, be a little bit more open in those adverts to say there are other ways of applying for this. Like if you'd like to record a short piece to camera and say, whatever it is, just to open that up so they're not closing the doors. Because it's to everybody's benefit, ultimately. I mean, that talent, that other ways of thinking, new perspectives coming into what we do as an industry, as a sector, as a creative place has got to be to the benefit of everyone.
Yeah, and I did some work with this fabulous organisation called Different Voices, and it's Bigger House Films, and that really taught me a lot of working with neurodiverse talent and what fabulous ideas they've got and how to bring them to fruition. And it was just again, the more people that can be educated like myself, you know, sort of like to inform them and sort of like open our eyes. I think we've got to do more of that. I really do.
This podcast is made possible thanks to the support of the awesome Liberi Consulting. Liberi offers specially tailored industry-related training courses. Check them out at libericonsulting.com. That's LIBERI consulting.com. You can also find links to their fantastic courses on the Festivus website.
Moving on to sort of another focus of your work, you've been involved in and around animated shorts and festivals, and you've been a massive part of delivering the BFI Short Film Fund. Do you think currently finding funding for shorts is a challenge? And if I were a producer looking with a short film idea, where would you advise me to go for funding for that?
Well, yes, it's always tough, you know, to get any funding. You know, don't get me started on development funding. Short film funding, yeah, I mean, there's a few answers. One, it depends where people are based. So always looking the nations and regions, or if you're based in London, you know, if you're based, you know, I sit in South Wales, so we have particular pots in Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland and England. So always look at where you are in your location. And if you felt that you could collaborate with somebody in a different location, a different nation and regions, then do it, and they're right for the project. Then so always look at what's up on your doorstep. I think sometimes people overlook the BFI network, and I think certainly for emerging talent, and that really cuts your teeth on, you know, a budget of 30 grand or under, you know, and then it's been really satisfying actually the last few years to get that fund up and running at the BFI and then help be their production consultant. and we've produced 20 films in the last few years. The first one was during the pandemic, and it's still open again for a third round.
Okay.
And the closing date for that is July the 9th. And those budgets are 30,000 to 120,000 for 15 minutes or under.
Significant amounts of money then.
Absolutely. And listen, a lot of listeners might go, well, that's not competitive to the rest of the world. But I feel it is. It's meaningful on lots of levels, and yes, you can be driven by different techniques. You might have to find some third-party finance, and then it starts to get complicated if you want to do a more complicated sort of film. But I feel that there was such a hiatus for a long time in the UK. It was good news, and it remains good news. And those films have done extremely well. But that leap up in also comes in the guidelines with, you have to have more credits to your name, or sort of like a combination of the writer, director, producer. You have to have had films shown at certain festivals that are within the guidelines. So people might not meet that criteria or be eligible. But BFI Network is throughout the throughout the UK. There's Creative Wales in Wales. There's Screen Scotland, Northern Ireland Screen. So there's lots of throughout the thing. What the significant thing is, and you could argue no pain, no gain, is applying for them, and there's a whole education about interpreting guidelines and interpreting sort of application forms of, well, what do they mean, when they're asking this question. And my advice is always to write more than you think. Try and use the maximum characters. Don't just put yes or no, because people are reading those applications and want to get a picture of you and your project. And exactly what we're talking about here, you've got to come across as enthusiastic. You've got to know your project. You've got to want to make your film. You've got so put as much as you can into explaining in the application process. The chances are you might not get it, and therefore, because they're competitive, and therefore just keep trying. There might be alternative pots that you could go after. There might be some business growth. It might not be a short film that you want to, you want to showcase in different ways. It might not be a narratively driven short film that you want to do. It might be an experimental film. It might be part of the indie films. So it might be all of that. So some pots suit some films and some pots suit others. And there's lots of Arts Council, are all throughout the UK. We've got Film Cymru here in Wales as well that do a Beacons film scheme. So there is lots that we could help put some links up. So.
No, absolutely. Funnily enough, I'm actually producing a session at the Children's Media Conference in July about exactly this. Where these pots of money are hidden, and we've got some very smart people who've actually received awards from England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland, and explaining, how they got them and what they were able to do with them. And it's. As the session title is, there's gold in them there hills. Where do you see shorts sitting in the animation landscape these days? Quite often they're seen as quite arty. Do you think they're still relevant, other than being sort of an art form in themselves?
Yes, absolutely, 120%, Julian. So I feel that they've never been what we used to call cash cows. So people are starting to see a return on them, but it won't be maybe to the budget of the production itself. But they always remain a showcase, a calling card. Maybe it's technology driven. Maybe you want to try something new. It's a perfect art form and duration to cut your teeth. It's perfect to have a team around you. On the BFI shorts that we've seen, it could be producer training. It could be, somebody bringing on an animation director. So it's so brilliant in lots and lots of ways. And it's the fact that is all the risk taken is in one entity, which is the short film. Rightly or wrongly, that is what you are trying to sort of place. I think what doesn't get enough credit is the art form of the different processes involved. So somebody that is more on experimental art, I just love experimental animation. I just love seeing their bodies of work and how they experiment, and maybe their outlet is completely different to a festival. Maybe it's in an art gallery. Maybe it's on one of those multi-screens in a railway station. So there's so many outlets out there for short films, and I absolutely feel that seeing it in front of an audience, there is no better way of showcasing yourself and your film, to see what an audience thinks. To see it in an auditorium with a live audience, not watching it on your screen, or is really, really great. And we've got platforms now that distribute shorts, so you can get some money. There's a whole festival strategy that you can do to back up shorts these days. So I feel they are still great work to be producing.
Now, you mentioned when you were just talking about shorts about maybe trying new ideas and new technologies and things like that. I mean, obviously AI, artificial intelligence, is on everybody's lips at the moment. There's been some social media chat in the last few days about the Annecy Festival, who are including, I think it's 4 short films this year, which, using Annecy's words, were created using generative AI and other techniques. Do you see AI creatively as a threat or an opportunity?
I don't know whether I would use those words. I feel that I think, and when I read that about Annecy, I thought, well, good on. It's their choice whether to show them or not, and to include them. And it gets the conversation moving, because that's what we all have to do. We have to talk about this. And I feel, if I zoom out, from a producer's angle, I just feel there isn't enough legality around it. I think there isn't a legality framework that we are all abiding by, or we are all working towards. And I feel that as a movement, we need as an industry, we need to come together to create this on a global level. Mm-hmm. So that's that. So I think the legality isn't there yet, and I think we need to sort that quite quickly. Because what worries me, so I wouldn't say it's a threat, but I do worry that where AI is getting its sources,
Yeah, sure.
and that worries me, is that where is it coming from? How is it getting it? And is there some protection of where that has come from? However, I would like to see it as being embraced in the future within this framework, to use it in productions in the manner to which it might be the best used. I don't see it taking over creatives. I don't see it taking over creators myself. And I hope to God that doesn't come true, because I just feel that our world and our art form is run by that creative mind. And I feel the same conversations would have happened about CGI and about other things that have come into our industry over the years. And we got over those hurdles.
No, absolutely. I'm a slightly ill-informed in this, but when I read the phrase generative AI, my assumption from that is that it's, AI is sort of known to be, as you just said, plucking bits from elsewhere, from the internet and other sources. It doesn't create, it just absorbs and then churns out again. But is generative AI creating new stuff itself, or is it still plucking stuff out of other sources and regurgitating it?
Well, I'm a bit ill-informed to this. Maybe I should have looked it up before coming on here. But
maybe I should do.
But I don't know is the answer, but as I said, I just worry about where it is coming from, and that how people are using it. You know, that you can just go. What I think a specific example might be coding. You know, that somebody somewhere is getting this coding, and sometimes that's a currency. That is a currency in its own. You know, somebody has done that coding. You know, and so that's what I don't like about it. Is that I would like to question, not that I don't like, I'd like to question where that is coming from, because that might be at source and that is somebody's hard work, you know? So I might be wrong. I'm probably the wrong person to talk about that, but I would like to see, you know, on a production level, pure production management level, I think it could be good news for different parts of our pipelines and different part of our workflows across a longer form series. I mean, I know people that are generating it for environments maybe, or in betweening, or, you know, someone's doing with rendering on short films. So I feel as long as that is keeping, as I said, within the legality of it, I think that is okay by me.
Okay, well, that's interesting. And actually, whilst you were, not that I wasn't listening to you, but I did actually, I just did Google it. And
it's good.
It says generative AI is a type of AI that can create new content and ideas, including conversations, stories, images, videos, and music. It's going to be a long debate, isn't it? It's going to be, you know, watch this space. It's, you know, as you said, it's not going away. And I think we all have to find ways to embrace it and use it. I tend to agree with you. I don't think it's ever going to replace the creative juices that make our industry so good. And talking about creative juices and being good, you ran the British Animation Awards. I think, was it for 6 years? And you're a co-founder of Animation UK. In your opinion, what makes British animation so good and competitive?
Oh, that's a great question. Yes, I just ran my third and final British Animation Awards, which I was delighted about. And just to say, on Animation UK, I ran the second phase of it. So that, me and Kate came in at 2017, and sort of Ollie got us in. But we sort of took it to the next phase. So that was good. And then I took over the British Animation Awards. I you know, words like innovative, storytelling, characterful, you know, I feel that we are a nation of diverse stories and storytelling ways, and that sits well on a global scale and a stage. And I still, after all these years, it's mind blowing when I see the different work on show at the British Animation Awards. You know, that there is, you know, for the same category, there's just this fantastic range of work and content that people have submitted, and that always blows my mind. You know, that we are really, really great. I think people push boundaries, which I love. I love seeing different processes. I love seeing that we are really great. I think it's inherent in our nature that we are script driven slightly, and we're stories are in our blood, maybe. And I think that, and I think, you know, a lot of our creators are just creative. And maybe what we're talking about there, maybe when I'm thinking about horses, I know a lot of creators do, you know, sort of street art, or, you know, there's another outlet to their creativity, you know, and, you know, if I followed in my family tradition, it would be more craft based. I'd be crocheting and knitting and things like that. But so, you know, but I'm rubbish at all of them. So, but I just think that and this goes back to the university side as well, and telling your families, and that is, if creativity is in your blood, you shouldn't be denied a career in it. You shouldn't, and you're good at it. You shouldn't push it down and become something else. Try your luck and be creative.
I think that's brilliant. Brilliant advice. I was actually, as we're sort of finishing up now, and I was just going to, just to say, I mean, obviously your experience and breadth of involvement in animation are astonishing. And, with that in mind, I want to ask you 3 quick questions just to finish up. What advice would you have given yourself at the start of your career? I
think putting yourself forward, we're talking about networking earlier on, I think be pushy, but in a good way. I don't mean be a stalker in a bad way, but be pushy and put yourself forward, and to say that don't be afraid to fail is the best advice I can always give people. Just try things. Don't be afraid.
I think that's good advice. I think one learns more from failure than success most of the time. What advice would you be giving someone who is thinking about getting into the industry right now?
Learn about the industry.
Right.
I don't think there's any excuses these days. I think I have to look at the daily newsletters. I don't know whether you do. I have to look at who's doing what, where, when. Nobody is going to signpost you to just one site where it's all written down. You've got to put the pieces together, and you've got to know the movers and the shakers and all the companies on your doorstep, the companies in London, the companies in Scotland. You've got to know the industry. And my big advice is do learn your craft. We love people that learn inside and out the craft of animation.
Helen, thank you. It's been brilliant talking to you. It really has, and sharing your insights and thoughts. What's the next big thing on Helen Brunsdon's to-do list?
Well, it's funny, isn't it? Because I do have moments where I want to stop, and sort of I feel like giving up, and I've never felt like that until sort of in the last year. Think, I'd rather be out in my garden. I think getting sort of like doing my planting, Julian. But my next. I'm just finishing up, just started actually some training that I've been helping Indie Lab, and we have some great speakers and trainers delivering that. And then I am just looking forward to being across the round 3 for the BFI, which produces short films that I'm dead proud of for the teams involved. It's a good proof of concept that funding works, and everybody is still in need of it. So those are my big things. But I'm having the summer off, Julian. I'm going to CMC, and then I'm having the summer off. Who'd have thought?
Well, good for you. Well, I will see you at CMC in July. We'll have an offline catch up.
Absolutely in person. So I've thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you for your time, and thank you for inviting me.
No, it's an absolute pleasure.
There you go. I hope you stuck with that episode to the end in spite of the audio issues. Helen has so much passion and enthusiasm for our animation industry. I find it contagious. I hope you do too. Thank you to Helen for joining Julian for this episode, and to you for listening. Join us again soon for more passionate enthusiasm. As always, a massive thanks to Julian Scott for hosting. Information about Film London can be found at filmlondon.org/animation. Well worth a visit. And once again, a huge thank you to Liberry Consulting for all their support in making this podcast series a reality. Check out their industry-related training courses on the Festivus website now. Thanks everyone, and come back soon for more episodes.